Live on YouTube.
Not quite preparing.
Oh, it says live on YouTube on my screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you letting Simon Ewing in?
Yeah, you want to let him in?
I'll admit. Yeah, I'm admitting him now.
Okay, we're live now. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, we're off, are we?
Yes.
Live on YouTube.
Not quite preparing.
Right.
It says live on YouTube on my screen.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Ian Fradgley. I'm chairman of the Town Council Planning Consultative Committee, and I welcome you to this meeting. Some housekeeping and information before we start. Item 5 on the agenda allows the public to address the meeting during public participation on non-agenda items. Thereafter, only persons registered to speak on specific applications will be permitted to do so when invited. This meeting is being recorded by the council and being broadcast to the press and public. Councillors, I can tell you that there were no deferrals from additional chairman's actions that we had. Please could I remind members to keep muted until invited to speak by having raised their virtual hand. When voting, we should be using the usual yes/no buttons. So I now declare this meeting open. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do I have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received no apologies.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest on items on the agenda, including contact with or communication from applicants, objectors, supporters or agents, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Do I have any declarations? No, thank you. Item 3, to receive written requests for dispensation. There are none. Item 4, to grant any requests. There are none. Item 5, public participation of non-agenda items. We have no members of the public here who are going to use public participation. Mr. Ewing, you are here for a specific application. Item 6, pre-planning applications. There are none. Item 7, to approve the draft open minutes of the Planning Consultative Committee meeting on the 23rd of June. Do I have your agreement to those minutes? If you'd like to tick the yes box. Yes, that's fine. Joe?
Yes, that's
Okay.
yeah, all approved.
Item 8.1, list of planning applications deferred from chairman's actions, which took place on the 1st of July. And it's number 20/0122/vary. And I would like to ask Neil to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Excellent.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
I will just share my screen so you can see the slides that I'm going to show you. And hopefully that will appear now on all your screens. Okay, this is a planning application to vary a condition on an extant planning permission. That extant planning permission was for demolition of an existing dwelling and outbuildings and for the erection of a new dwelling with associated works. You considered that application in December 2017 and you returned a comment of no representations subject to no adverse impact on neighbours. The application site is outlined in red on the plan before you. It's a property known as Beechcroft. I should say from the outset that works are well underway. I haven't been to the site, so I don't know how far they have progressed, but it's quite clear that works have progressed quite significantly. What is before you today is an application to vary a condition on the permission which relates to the drawing numbers. and the approved drawings, and that is in order to make alterations to the build. The description of the development describes them as alterations to the external appearance of the building to include an increase in ridge height, removal of windows and dormers, enlargement of other dormers, introduction of other roof lights, alterations to the design of the central forward projecting gable on the principal elevation, i.e. the porch, and alterations to fenestration detail on the principal elevation, and also the variation of a chimney design. And in essence, the reason for the increase in the ridge height is to create habitable accommodation within the roof. From my understanding, there's no alterations to the footprint of the building. That plan before you now is the approved site plan, and my understanding is that's not changing. Certainly there is no revised site plan on the current application under that 2020 reference. So as you can see, that's the footprint of the property. Dark Lane is to one side here and here. So it's sort of on the corner effectively of Dark Lane. Now these are the approved elevations. The top one is the front elevation. The bottom one is the rear elevation. I'll show you the sides in a moment, but what I'm going to do is flick between the approved elevations and the now proposed elevations so you can hopefully see some visual differences. They are done in a slightly different context and format, so they're not quite a like for like. This plan obviously shows the side elevations as well, but the top left image here is the now proposed elevation on the front, and the bottom one is the proposed rear elevation. So again, if I flick between the two, so top one's front, so you can see two dormer windows in the front elevation. They're now going to roof lights. That's the approved front detail. And that's now the proposed front detail. So that's the addition of the porch structure. In terms of the rear elevation, there's two dormers on the main house and one on the above the garage. You can see that those dormers have got slightly larger. And also there are two new roof lights in here, which aren't on the approved rear elevation. In terms of the side elevations, not an awful lot changing. These are the approved side elevations. The top one is the one that faces Dark Lane, and the bottom one is the one that faces the neighbour. So again, the top one is the one that effectively faces the neighbour. Bottom one is the one that faces Dark Lane. So actually less windows on the elevation facing the neighbour. So again, that's the proposed elevation facing the neighbour. That's the approved elevation facing the neighbour. You can also see on this elevation, not a great deal of detail, but the chimney is changing in terms of the substance of the structure. So it's becoming slightly more freestanding there than it is there. So slightly higher chimney effectively away from the roof slope. Whilst this isn't in the description of the development, I have a feeling that this element is going up as well. So if I flick between the two, can you see the ridge line of the roof above the garage almost hits the top of the ridge of that forward projecting gable? Maybe it's slightly lower by a few hundred millimeters, but if you now look at that, it is taller. So either that ridge line has gone up in height or that projection has come down in height. That said, that element I suspect is the less contentious element because that's the elevation that fronts the road, i.e. this part here, as opposed to the elevation that's right next to the neighbour. I can show you floor plans if you wish, but essentially they are the same with the exception of the bedroom in the roof, which is just shown to the right of that plan there. So in terms of planning issues, obviously the extant permission is a significant material planning consideration. It is a fallback position, effectively. What you now need to focus on is the changes between the approved development and what is now before you. There is some doubt as to whether or not the proposals that are before you are the most accurate. I don't know if that's the correct situation. I've not been to the site, not measured it, neither of you guys. You have to determine what is before you. If there is suspicion that these plans do not represent what is actually built, then obviously you can red flag that with the council. In terms of, just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, in terms of material considerations, because this is retrospective and you see a lot of retrospective applications, that's not a reason to justify opposing the scheme or objecting to the scheme. At the end of the day, you've got to determine what is before you and based on material planning considerations. So the fact that it's not as it was originally supposed to be should not be held against the application. If you feel the application is unacceptable, then obviously you need to demonstrate sound planning reasons why that is the case. Or indeed, if you feel that these adjustments are acceptable, then obviously then that's the case also. Your previous comments, as I say, raised the issue of the impact on the neighbour. It's very difficult for you as a planning committee to judge what harm is happening to a neighbour if you haven't been on the application site and in the neighbour's site. So I would suggest that this is a fairly local issue in terms of the amount of people that are affected by it. But that's something that the planning officer at the district council should be very aware of, very familiar with, because they obviously visit all application sites and do that technical assessment and judgment. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. First off, are there any points of clarification? Would you like to raise your hand for Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Neil, I was struggling to see how much higher the roof line was on the new application compared to the old one. Can you clarify?
I can. According to the applicant, they're suggesting that it's 380 millimetres higher, so it's 0.38 metres. There is doubt as to whether that is accurate, but without a printed copy of the plan and a scale rule, I can't measure the difference between the two. All I can do is, like you, look at it effectively by eye. Which is very difficult, I have to say, even on a screen. I mean, it's a large property already. It's quite substantially larger than the existing house that was on the site, which was a bungalow. But that is what has been approved. That is now what is proposed. I don't doubt that these drawings show a 3.8 metre, sorry, a 0.3 8 metre increase in height, but whether or not that's how they have actually built it is another matter. To a certain extent, that's not your concern, other than the fact that you can raise this with the planning officer to say that these drawings don't represent what is actually built, and it's down to the planning authority to enforce that, to investigate that, and to make sure that these plans do accurately show the height. But basically, without going out there with a tape measure and measuring it, we simply don't know, and that's not our task. That's the planning authorities.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Do I have anybody else that wants to have a point of clarification? Councillor Cleeve?
I'm just wondering, on the application yet, have there been any comments from the neighbour that's affected?
There have been a number of comments submitted. Bear with me 1 second. So the current application has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 letters plus something from the Tiddington Village Residents Association, which perhaps is surprising given that there's only probably one neighbour that's directly affected or is most affected. Obviously, what I would say is it's not the amount of objections that are raised, it's the substance of the objections. So in other words, one cogent argument raised in a single letter is better than 100 letters that are talking about irrelevant issues, if you see what I mean. That's obviously a draconian way of describing it, but I wouldn't necessarily base your judgment on the number of letters received. It's the substance of those letters. And I know that Councillor Rolfe is here to talk as the district councillor, and I'm sure she will bring to your attention those local issues.
May I just ask, are any of them to do with the height change that we've been talking about?
Yeah, there's that has been raised in respect of the dominance of the new property and the effect that that has not just on immediate neighbours but also on the character and appearance of the street effectively. So that's something that has been raised, as well as the impact on the neighbour in terms of loss of privacy.
Okay, I can't see any more hands up. Is that it? Right, thank you. We now go on to our speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Simon Ewing, who is here to object to the application. Mr. Ewing, you will have 3 minutes. We'll give you some time. 30 seconds before the end of the 3rd minute, you'll get a signal. Okay, tell us when you want to start.
Yes, okay. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I speak on behalf of several residents of Dark Lane who are affected. We strongly object to this application because the house has not been built for the approval granted, and so the extra height, bulk, positioning and overall mass of the property make it overbearing, with loss of amenity suffered by several neighbours. Some are overshadowed due to the extra height and suffer loss of light. Some suffer loss of privacy due to the overlooking of their house and garden from 3 extra windows added to an unapproved 2nd floor created within the heightened roof, and due to the moving outwards of two enlarged central dormer windows in the expanded 1st floor roof. This affects privacy of the occupants of adjacent buildings, particularly with regard to their right of the quiet enjoyment of garden amenity. We object because the development is much higher than approved, which is a major concern for us, and also contrary to the Council's planning policy CS20, which states that the replacement dwelling must not be visually intrusive and not significantly larger than dwelling it replaces. The bungalow it replaces was 5.8 metres tall. The main ridge of the new 3-storey house is estimated at 8.4 metres tall. This is 2.6 metres or 45% taller than the building it replaces. The new house, we believe, has also nearly 3 times the gross floor area and 2.5 times the internal volume than the dwelling it replaces. So the new house is much larger, 45% taller and 3 times the floor area. From the planning statement of the 2018 approved application, it states the new house will be 6.9 metres tall. On this application, the main ridge, as I said, is measured at 8.4 metres tall. This is 1.5 metres taller than the approval granted. All the other ridge lines are more than 0.5 metre taller than the approval granted, all the ridge lines. It also appears that the eaves height has been raised, so the whole roof appears much bigger, and also it's not shown correctly in the plans you've just been shown. The property sits in a very prominent position in Dark Lane in the fork of the road and has the road on its 2 boundaries. The old dwelling was a bungalow which sat several metres from these boundaries. The new building has a 2-storey structure roughly 1 metre from the southwest boundary, 1 metre from the road. Because this part of the building was built taller than allowed and only 1 metre from the boundary of the road, it makes it overbearing and out of character. There are other large buildings in Dark Lane, but they are set back 15 to 25 metres from the road. We also consider the unapproved and overlarge external porch to be not in keeping with neighbouring properties.
30 seconds.
Yep. In conclusion, the unauthorised changes to this property are major and manifold. We object to this application as due to its extra height, size, positioning and massing, this property has an unacceptable adverse effect on the amenities of the surrounding properties and the area by overlooking, loss of privacy, shadowing, loss of light and visually overbearing impact. And I stress that it's not as in the plans that we've just been shown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ewing. Would you like to stay there for a moment and I'll see if anybody wants to ask for any questions, if that's okay?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Ewing, I presume that you objected to the original application, did you? And
We didn't, because we were consulted by the applicants who made various promises only to build a 2-storey building and said the building would be 1,100 metres taller than the bungalow. He's then broken every single promise he made.
I understand that he's developed it beyond the original planning application, but you didn't object to the original application. That's right. Okay, thank you.
Right. Do I have anybody else who wants to ask Mr. Ewing a question? No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ewing, for your presentation.
Thank you.
The next item is supporters, and we don't seem to have any supporters. The next item is the applicant, and we don't have the applicant. The last item for speakers is for the ward councillor, who is Councillor Rolfe, who is here. Right, Councillor Rolfe, you get 3 minutes as usual. Tell us when you want to start.
I'll start now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Firstly, I want to emphasise that this application is by no means an amendment to Very application. The house that is built now is a completely different house to that of the approved application in 2018. The drawings on the Very do not correspond with the house that is built. The house that is built is a metre higher, at least, than the original approved application. The planner has demonstrated that there is a difference of just under 1 metre and was sent drawings, which I sent to Neil. The footprint is bigger than the original approved application, although this has to be verified by the planner. There is a functional 3rd storey to the built house, which is not on the original approved application. Please note, I have an email from the agent and applicant, which states categorically there'll be no 3rd storey. There are a further 3 large windows on the 3rd storey, not on the original approved application. There is a huge oversized out of character porch, not on the original application approved. The built house, now seen from the entrance to Dark Lane, is so out of character and out of street scene character. It is the first thing you see as you look down, and it is overbearing and very dominant in view. It has changed the vista beyond recognition. The added oversized 3rd storey windows now affect the privacy of residents in Pinecroft Cottage and Feldon Croft. This is not what the neighbours approved in 2018 after several meetings with myself and the neighbours and the applicant. They would not have agreed to approve had they have known what would happen. No one in the area would have agreed to a 3-storey house of huge proportion. You have here an applicant and builder who decided to make the house different to the original approved application, as the builder said it would be all right and we would get retrospective approval. This has been told to me by the applicant. There is a planning process which everyone signs up to, and I suggest to you that this very application should be refused for all the above reasons, but most of all, that the applicant and builder took absolutely no notice of this process and basically, dare I say, attempt to get away with it. If we allow this to happen, not only as a precedent set, but it makes a mockery of planning rules. Just one other thing which I want to add, and it's not a planning reason, but for those residents, the value of their property has hugely decreased because they were
30 seconds
out onto a bungalow. They're now looking out onto an oversized, dominant house, which will affect the value of their property. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rolfe. Do I have any questions for Councillor Rolfe? If you'd like to, Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, just wondering, were there any objections to the original one, the original application?
There were no, the process was such that we had 3 meetings with the neighbours and the applicant and the agent, and a lot of compromises were made, and the residents and the neighbours agreed to the original application, and they believed the applicant to be building that original application, and it turned out that it wasn't.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No. Right, thank you for your contribution, Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you.
If you could mute yourself. Right, from what you've heard from the speakers, are there any further points of clarification that you'd like from or comments from Neil? Councillor Dowling?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Neil, is it possible you might put the location plan back up on screen? I want the first, almost the first print that you put up. Right, I'm just going to pinch that out for a bigger view. Right, okay, I've got that one. Now, the next one was the footprint, I believe, the one sort of brown. Yeah, can you just raise that into the middle? Now, you told us, Neil, that the footprint didn't appear to be the same, yet we've just heard from the objector that the footprint is a lot bigger. Any comments to make on that?
Yeah, through you, Chairman. I didn't say the footprint was the same as the original bungalow. I said that it appears that the footprint of the application before you is the same as the approved footprint.
Oh, right. I got that.
Clearly, this is a much larger dwelling than the bungalow, but planning permission has been granted for a very substantial replacement dwelling on the site. And what you need to focus your minds on is those additional changes now.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other points of clarification from Neil? No, there are none. So we will now go into debate. Does anybody want to start off before I go around the room? Councillor Cleave.
I think the fact that they've gone completely away from the diagram is appalling. And as Councillor Rolfe said, you know, there's a planning precedent set. There's a planning rules, and they've gone against it. And a precedent, if we did approve it, a precedent would be set, and anybody could then change it retrospectively. So I personally think that they've gone about it the wrong way, and they really should stick to what they have. If they could talk to all their neighbours and with agreements, the neighbours did accept what the original application, then that's the one that they should have stuck with. My opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Cleave. Right, I'll go around. Councillor Taylor.
Personally, looking at it, I would agree with everything that Jill's just said. Initially, when I looked at the drawings, I thought maybe it wasn't a major issue, but listening to the actual people who've opposed it there, I see a different opinion on it completely now, and I think maybe we would be setting a precedent if we decided to approve this.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Mr. Mayor.
I probably should have asked this a question of Neil as point of clarification, but my understanding is there are lots of applications that do come back for retrospective planning permission, and to refuse just on the basis of we want them to go through the right process, that wouldn't be a valid objection anyway. So my understanding is we need to look at it on its merits of would we have approved this in the original situation. My gut feel is I'm not seeing the plans representing what the objectors are saying. So I think I'm generally opposed, but I think I would like to see clarification of the plans of the new building as they are now, because the difference in the roof line, there's a huge difference between 1.5 meters and 0.38, which is the two conflicting measurements. So I think we need clarification of the design and build before we make a final decision. But in principle, I oppose. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Fradgley.
I'm always very disturbed when we get a retrospective planning application, which varies so considerably from the first application. And this actually has, as the Mayor has just pointed out, it's got further confusions attached to it, because we're not entirely sure what we've just been shown in the plans is actually what is happening on the ground. And I think this needs, at the very least, proper exploration by enforcement. And that would come about with a refusal at this stage, I would understand. So on those grounds at this stage, I think I'm going for an objection to this application, because it varies considerably from the original, and we're still not exactly sure what the variation is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Chair. One of my biggest worries is the fact that the applicant told Councillor Rolfe that the developer told him that if they just put it in retrospectively, we'll get it anyway. I think that's a flagrant flouting of the planning laws. Personally, I don't remember the original one in 2018, but we've seen it, and I think this differs, as everybody else has said, so much from the other one. I think that I will definitely be voting for a refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Lee.
Hi there. Just thinking in the context of what is in front of us, obviously there's doubt on the legitimacy of the plans, which I think is a development control issue. And obviously adherence to the original plans is another development control issue, which the District Council can take action for. In terms of looking at the scheme as it stands on its own merits, it's clearly a replacement dwelling for a bungalow. So would we as a council see a large development on what was originally a bungalow? I'm sure we'd have concerns if we were looking at this application afresh. Would we approve effectively a 3-storey development on the site of a bungalow? And I think, in my mind, I think that would be unacceptable for me, particularly with the noted impacts to the surrounding dwellings.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Dyer. Unmute yourself, Roy.
Where am I?
You're there. Just say something. You've muted yourself again, Roy. Demute yourself, Roy.
Again, is that okay?
Yes.
It's a vacant disregard for planning. If I can carry on anyhow, we might well not bother with these meetings. No, I shall turn it down.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer.
Thank you.
Right, does anybody want to say anything else? Councillor Cleave.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether Neil could probably answer this as well. Just going back to what Mr. Mayor and Councillor Lee said. Would we, if this had come to us as a first application, would we have approved a 3-storey building in that area? Are there any others in the area? I've had a quick look at Street View, and I can't see anything that's a 3-storey. So I was just wondering, if it was a first-time application, would we have allowed that through in the first place?
Sorry. Sorry.
Would you like me to? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't possibly answer that question for you because you're a committee and you've all got your own subjective views and opinions on this. But more fundamentally, I think it's probably the wrong question that you should be asking yourself now. Nobody likes retrospective applications. The planning officers don't like it. The neighbours don't like it. Town council doesn't like it. But you cannot let that taint your views and opinions of this application. We are where we are. It's not a material planning consideration to oppose a scheme just because it's retrospective, just because they've, to coin a golf phrase, pinched an inch and made it a bit bigger. What's been said in emails and in meetings, I'm afraid, just has to be taken on the chin. Some people say things and just don't follow it through. None of that's binding. It's not the way it should be, but that's just the planning system, unfortunately. You're faced with an application which amends an extant planning permission, and your judgment has to rest entirely on those material changes. The fact that there is a substantial dwelling that has been approved in replacement of the small bungalow is just a matter of fact now. What you've got to decide is whether or not those changes that I've tried to highlight to you are so bad that it warrants a refusal of planning permission. So you need to really narrow your focus on just what those changes are, and try not to let your judgment be influenced by the fact that the applicant has clearly gone about this the wrong way. And you need to, if you're going to oppose this, come up with planning reasons why those changes are harmful. Even if you think that the dwelling that has been approved is now harmful, bearing in mind you didn't when you looked at it last time, you need to be clear to the planning authority why these additional changes now tip the balance in respect of one of refusal as opposed to no representations, which were your previous comments.
Could I add that there's a block of flats next to it, and I think that's 3-storey block of flats. But apart from that, what I'm having difficulty with in what we've explored is that I'm sure one of our speakers said to us that the drawings in front of us on the District Council website are not the latest set of drawings, which then gives me a worry because we're making a judgment on a set of drawings that we can see on a website, not on the ones that are supposedly the ones that are on the table from the developer or whoever. Sorry, Councillor Rolfe. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Chair. Regardless of the planning, one of our staple replies is no representation subject to impact on the neighbours. Okay, well, I'd like to point out that this, even the plans that they put in front of us, which appear to be smaller than the building actually is, does have a harmful effect on the neighbours because of now overlooking on, as we've heard from our speaker, overlooking on 2 properties, not the one that was mentioned earlier. So you've got impact on 2 neighbours, an adverse impact on 2 neighbours, and in my opinion, that's enough to warrant a refusal.
Does anybody else want to add anything? Councillor Cleave.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking for my hand raised. From my understanding, again, looking at Street View and everything, the flats that you referred to are quite far away and in the bowl and out of sight. So if it's a sight line, that even if it's 3 stories, it's the sight line that's changed. So those flats are quite different.
Thank you, Councillor Cleave. Councillor Fradgley.
I have a concern that we're making a judgment on a set of drawings that we are uncertain are correct. And on that as well, I would actually want to refuse at this point.
Well, I don't wish to influence you, but I don't see how we can make a judgment on a set of plans if they're not the correct plans. And at the very least, we should put in a holding objection until we can see the proper plans. But I'm just the chair. You're the ones that are going to make the decision. Right. Do I have a proposal? Anybody brave enough to give me a proposal? Councillor Dowling.
Yeah, go on then. I'd like to propose that we put a holding objection on this application until we see the correct plans. As you just said, Chair, it would seem a bit churlish to make a decision, although in my mind I've already made an objection, but I feel that we should certainly put an objection in until we see the correct plans.
Okay, I've got a Councillor Fradgley, before I ask for a second, do you want to say anything?
I was actually going to say that I would support that at this point.
What, Mr.
I would support. I'd second Councillor Darling's proposal.
Okay. Right. Could I take a vote on that, please? I was going to say Councillor Rolfe, but of course you can't vote. Yes, Councillor Dyer. Yeah, it's unanimous.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. What's happening now, Mr. Ewing, is that the planning consultant is, oh, he's already done it. He's going to write our submission to the district council. And once he's finished, he will read it out. And then the councillors will either want some changes or we will submit it.
Thank you.
Have you finished, Neil?
I have, Chair. So I've written so far, the Town Council is disappointed to see that the proposed development is retrospective with flagrant breach of planning rules. There are also uncertainties surrounding the plans submitted, which do not appear to be representative of the development taking place on site. This needs to be checked and clarified by the planning authority. Notwithstanding the above, the proposed increase in height would tip the balance to an overly dominant replacement dwelling, which would harm the character and appearance of the street scene and cause adverse harm to the immediate neighbours by way of overbearing and loss of privacy.
Councillors, are you happy with that? Could I have a vote?
Could I just, sorry, Neil, when you read it, you read street scene, but you haven't got scene in your text.
No.
Thank you, Mayor. That's now altered.
Thank you. Can I have a vote, please? Give me a tick. Yes, that's not quite unanimous. Councillor Lee, do you wish to say something? Which is a bit awkward.
Well, I was trying to add into what was written on the screen. It's really if we could possibly get a drawing which compares the previous application to the current one, because obviously it's a bit difficult to see flicking between the two what the differences are. So I don't know if that's worth specifying in the text as well.
Well, I'm going to accept the vote that's just been made, but I would ask Neil if we could put an adjustment to that note. Have you got something now, Neil?
I have indeed. Let me just put it back up on screen and I'll read out the new section. Well, I'll highlight it there. I've added a comparative plan overlaying the outline of the approved dwelling against the development as built on site would be extremely helpful and assist in further consideration of this application.
Thank you, Neil. Could you flick it off now, Neil? Could I have your views on that? Keep your ticks on or off. Councillor Dyer, are you voting for that? Right, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ewing. That now signals the end of judgment on this application. So if you can either stay and listen to the next proceedings or you may go. We may possibly see you again in sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Item 8.2, to note the action by the town clerk regarding the chairman's actions on the 1st of July and the additional chairman's actions on the 22nd of July, June, sorry. No, it's July. Sorry. Oh, wasn't the 22nd of June, was it? It was the 7th of July.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Councillor Darling had understandably one or two issues which meant that he didn't attend the meeting. So I was the only councillor that was present making judgments. So I took decisions, and I would appreciate it if you would satisfy yourselves that you agree with the decisions I made. I obviously made them with Neil's assistance. Otherwise, I feel a bit vulnerable if I'm the only one who has had a say in an application. Okay, and this is additional chairman's actions, which we did yesterday morning. Okay, are you all happy to do that? Thank you. Right, item 8.3, 8.3a, street trading, none. 8.3b, burger priest, an application. Is anybody a burger expert who can enlighten us on this one? Does anybody want to say anything? You're all very quiet. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Can I just check then? This is just good. I mean, burger priest means nothing to me whatsoever, but I presume this is just another fast food retail burger bar as per several that are already in Belcourt, and presumably the recorded music and sell alcohol is common across everybody in Belcourt. So they're not asking for anything different than anybody else, in which case I've got no objections.
That I do not know, Mr. Mayor. The timings might not be the same as the timings of other places like this in Belcourt.
In which case I'll rephrase my question and say, could everybody else, well, has anybody else got those times, might be the quick answer. Because if we're happy to approve up to 11 o'clock, then that's fine. It's okay. whether anybody else has been refused timing up to 11 o'clock, which I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. No, nobody else has been refused. There are a couple of late licences there till 1 or 2 in the morning. I think we'd be churlish to turn this down. We're trying to get people to come to our town. Another restaurant in Belcourt's fine with everybody, I would think.
Thank you, Councillor Dowling. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what Bill said there, actually, that there are other 2 sites, Vino and or Bar 1, which do have that licensing facility, and it is an empty unit which is going to be filled, which I think we need to encourage at this time to, you know, let's have a vibrant business in there rather than an empty unit.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Fradgley.
Just pleased to see that people have got confidence in the future to be opening a business in Belcourt, and I hope it's all going to be very successful for them. And the licence will reflect what the other licences are in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Fradgley. Councillor Cleave.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I know Old Bar 1 is open till midnight. I've just double checked that. So the fact that this is open is asking for till 11 o'clock. That means it's an hour less than the others. So I don't think it's going to be any different to what's already there. So I would be happy to see it there.
You're just on your way there, are you, Councillor Cleave?
I don't know if they've got any vegan ones there, so we'll see.
Okay. I'm getting a feeling that everybody's happy with this. Could I take a vote, please? If you could give us some ticks. Right, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, item 8.4, notices of decision. It doesn't look as if there's been much going on recently, and there were absolutely no differences between STC and SDC. But there were only half a dozen anyway, so. Right, we now come to item 8.5, any other business? Revised terms of reference on the proposed new committee structure. Does anybody have anything to say?
Quite happy.
Has everybody read them diligently read them? Councillor Dowling.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. They're absolutely perfect. They match all the other terms of reference from the other committees, and I think it's there might be the odd little thing that needs to be amended as we go along, but in general we should accept them as they are.
Absolutely.
I think once we've agreed these, unless there's something dramatically wrong, we are supposed to review these on an annual basis anyway. Councillor Cleave?
Yeah, just looking at it, said obviously the planning committee should appoint one member from amongst this number to act as liaison. That was 1.2.
Yeah. I was going to come to that, Councillor Cleave.
Okay, then that's fine.
Councillor Lee?
Hi there. Yeah, on the point around the liaison with the Environment Committee, we did actually discuss that as an Environment Committee. Obviously, we do see a link with that, and we saw good coverage from the people that sit on the Environment Committee already, and how there being at least one person from the Environment Committee already on all of the other committees. So for ease, it's possibly good to think about that, and we're certainly, as an Environment Committee, happy to have a dual role in terms of working on the Environment Committee and also on the standing committees.
Are you hinting that you're on this committee, Councillor Lee?
Well, I'm on it, and there's a couple of other people as well who are also on it. So there's probably, to save people time, there could be some candidates already for that role.
All right. Any other issues or things you want to talk about on the list? Councillor Dowling?
No, I think, as I said, I think I've read them through and I think it's fine.
Okay, Councillor Fradgley?
I think it's going to be quite interesting going forwards with planning, because I think planning will actually, I think a lot of us will have a lot to say about climate change and planning applications that come through, and where we would like to see things going, and actually putting pressure on to make things happen if we can.
Okay, so can I have a ticks, please, to say you're happy with the right, thank you, that's unanimous. Can we just discuss this the environment thing first? Does anybody want to lead on it? Councillor Lee.
Yeah, certainly I'll have to look along the list. So certainly Councillor Jenny Fanchley and I are on it, along with Councillor Dyer, you're still on the environment, and Councillor Cleave. So we've got 4 people already on the committee. So I'd suggest it was one of us 4 that acts as the liaison, obviously subject to agreement with the rest of the committee.
Does any one of you of the 4 wish to act as liaison?
May I nominate Councillor Fradgley?
I was just looking. I was just looking for my blue hand to say I'm quite happy to be that liaison.
Okay. Can I have a vote on that, please? Councillor Dowling? No, he's got something wrong with his thumb, I think. Okay, Councillor Fradgley. I think we can think that's unanimous with counting Councillor Darling's thumb. Okay, so you will deal with that. Okay. Item 9, Chairman's verbal report. There isn't one. Item 10, requests for alterations of recommendation. As you'll probably be aware, we do have one because we were requested to review the TA Centre application based on the new design proposals. And there was a majority for one of the options, which I think they classified as option 2. And that is also in the opinion, the same in the opinion of the SDC planning officer who likes option 2. So we had it on Chairman's Actions yesterday and we chose not to bring it to committee because you'd already agreed to it last week anyway. So what we've done is we've removed our holding objection, which is what we had in there. So I hope you're all happy with that. Okay. Liz Nicholson was getting ready to register to speak again this evening. So I had to say to Lisa to ask her not to wait until 12 noon yesterday. Okay. Item 11, to register to speak at SDC Planning. It's Planning A tomorrow, and I am attending regarding the care home proposals on Western Road. That's being judged tomorrow. I have to say that the way we do things on the system we're using now, it seems to me a lot better than the one I'm being offered at SDC. I'm not allowed any privileges because I'm also a district councillor. And the way they deal with people is that you can click on and watch it, but if you wish to speak, you've got to ring them up and you'll talk to them through your phone, which seems a bit antiquated to me. So I'll let you know what the experience is like. Planning B on the 15th of July. The agenda has been published today and there are no items on there which concern us. And there will be a Planning A again on the 22nd of July. So it's very clear that the District Council are clearing a huge backlog of applications. Item 12, to appoint substitutes. As I mentioned, Councillor Dowling was not able to attend. And to be honest, we didn't really have time to haul in the substitute. But we do have a Chairman's Actions on the 29th of July. Could I have a volunteer in case either myself or Councillor Dowling are not able to attend? Councillor Taylor. Thank you. Okay, so the next meeting we've got scheduled for planning is the 4th of August at 6 o'clock, and I'm closing the meeting at 18:59. So it's just under an hour. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. I've got to go to another meeting now.
Right, that's what it is. That's what the whole life now. One meeting to the next.
I know.
I've sat here all day so far. One meeting since 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how many meetings you could fit in now.
It's live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Do you want to switch YouTube off?
I'm not able to switch it off. I think the host has to close it.
How do I do that?
Well, it will stop when the meeting ends.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So we're going to end the meeting then.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do I have to end the meeting, Joe, or do you do it?
I think it will stop when you go.